Hello everybody and welcome to the fourth video in our series of videos on the Middle Ages. As always, we begin with our learning outcomes. So by the end of this presentation, you guys should know the duties of a noble lady during the Middle Ages. Second, you guys should know a typical Middle Ages lady's appearance and what she did for entertainment. And finally, you guys should be able to give an example of misogyny in the Middle Ages. In our last video, we looked at the life inside the keep of a castle and some of the Lord's roles. Today we will look at the standard lady's role in the castle, and we also pick up on one of the themes we explored in our study of ancient Rome, that is misogyny, or the prejudice or hatred of women. So we will look at the duties of the lady in the castle. So one of the first things that the lady of the castle was in charge of was the domestic duties in the house. So she would ensure that there was enough food in the storerooms, which would be based down here underneath the kitchen beside the dungeons, and she would be oversee the salting of the food, which was necessary for its preservation. Another duty that the lady of the castle would have was when the lord of the castle was away, she was the person who would be left in charge of the running of the castle. The third main duty she would have was that she would be responsible for raising the children. However, the children weren't always their own, as nobles could send their children away from the age of 7 to be taught by another noble family. And a lady of the castle was helped by the ladies in waiting, who were usually her relatives or other noble women who would help with the education of the noble children that were sent to them. Another duty that a lady would have typically had was when there was no doctor available, she was expected to be able to mix medicine from herbs grown in the garden. Onto their appearance, they usually wore these long, expensive silk dresses and these kind of strange looking headdresses. For entertainment, they would play musical instruments, games of chess, or they also did embroidery. They would also partake in a form of hunting called hawking, where they would train birds to fly from the wrist and bring back small prey. So now that we've looked at what the standard life of a noblewoman during the Middle Ages was like, we're going to look at some of the more important women in the Middle Ages. So two of the most famous women of the Middle Ages were of French descent. The first was Eleanor of Aquitaine, who was one of the richest and most powerful women during the Middle Ages. She lived from 1122 to 1204. First of all, she married the future king of France when she was aged 15. That marriage fell apart and they divorced after they had a failed crusade. And then she went on and she married the future king of England, King Henry II, in 1152. So Eleanor, she played a massive part in ruling Henry's empire, which would soon include Ireland when we'll look at the Norman invasion and Henry's role in that. After Henry's death, she ruled as a regent while her son Richard I fought in the Crusades. And again, we will be looking at the Crusades in another video in their detail. But Eleanor was a very, very powerful lady and a very rich lady who had a massive influence on English power in the Middle Ages. Another famous lady of the time was Joan of Arc, who at the age of 16, thanks to supposed visions from God, led the French to victory over English in the 1420s. Famously, she lifted the siege of Orleans and she helped steer the French towards victory in the 100 Years' War, which actually went on for 116 years and really wasn't one war, but the 100 Years' War seems to be the label that people like to give it. She ensured that Charles VII of France became king and that France didn't become part of England, which was a massive turning point in history. However, one would think after she did this that she would earn the loyalty of Charles, but he abandoned her to the English and she was burned at the stake when she fell into their hands. Now, the burning at the stake became a common fate for women during the Middle Ages as the Christian church became more and more misogynistic. Women had prominent roles in the church with abbesses or heads of nunneries like Hildegard of Bingen. These ladies were very powerful and learned and contributed to life in the church. However, when Pope Innocent III became Pope in the 1210s, he wanted women's roles in the church severely reduced. He had excommunicated and put down a reform organization known as the Cathars. And this sect wanted a bigger role for women within the church. Pope Innocent quite violently had these people killed. Um, he also ensured that women were permanently barred from hearing confessions and preaching, um, with even their role in singing during the service to be reduced as well. With the rise of misogyny came the myth of women as witches. A witch would be seen as this terrifying person capable of threatening men and their power. They were often portrayed as interacting with the devil, and it was used as a tool to keep women in their place. If a woman rose up too strongly within the community or did something that wasn't liked by people, she could be called a witch, and could be killed for this. One of the first witch trials to actually take place in the Middle Ages was the trial of Lady Alice Keitler of Kilkenny in Ireland in 1324. She was convicted as a witch, but she escaped and was from being burned at the stake. However, her servant Petronilla was not so lucky, and she was one of the first people burned at the stake for witchcraft. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. So by now you guys should know the duties of a noble lady in the Middle Ages. You guys should know what a typical Middle Ages lady looked like and what she did for entertainment. And finally, you guys should be able to give an example of misogyny in the Middle Ages. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys got something good from this video.